Some of us have hardcore audiophile systems with transports, DACs, headphone amps, amplifiers, preamplifiers, and all of the different interconnects that go between them. You might just want something simpler. I know that I do sometimes. Sometimes it's nice to just have a single box that you can connect to your computer with just a single USB cable or an optical cable. A single box that can deliver great sound straight to your headphones or a pair of active speakers. A single box that doesn't have to cost an arm, a leg, and a kidney. That's when you might want to get yourself a Burson Audio Playmate 3. But it's also not the only option for this type of single box solution, so let's talk about who it's probably best for. The first thing to clarify here is that there are two flavors of Playmate 3 from Burson Audio. The standard version is $599 and it comes with the basic NE5532 op amps. It's got the SP01 power control chips from Burson Audio and just a regular old inline power brick. The deluxe version is $999 and it comes with Burson's own premium V7 op amps, the upgraded SP02 power control chips, an upgraded supercharger power supply from Burson Audio, and also a remote control. If you're not familiar with Burson's range of premium op amps, their power control chips, and their various upgraded power supplies, I've covered all of those in different videos here on this channel. But the short version of it is that each of them can bring a significant and noticeable sonic improvement to the devices they're connected to. And then using them all together has a cumulative effect to produce even better sound. And as you've already seen, that's the version of the Playmate 3 that I've got here. The best possible version, the deluxe version, the one that's the most you can get straight from the shop without going and adding on extra further upgrades, such as the Fusion Core power supply or the 5 amp supercharger that's going to cost you extra again. Regardless of which version of the Playmate 3 you buy though, what you're always getting is a powerful DAC and headphone amp combo that can also work as a preamp feeding out to your active speakers or into a power amp for passive speakers, or you could use it as just a DAC into an external preamp if you wanted to, but we'll talk more about that in a moment. The Playmate 3 has an ES9039 DAC chip mated with a 3-watt Class A headphone amp. You've also got lots of controls available as to how it works internally, and we'll explain that in more detail soon. As a device that's been designed for computers as the most regular source that's likely to get plugged into them, the Playmate 3 also offers you a headset connection, and that's going to take the sound from your microphone on your headset back through the 3.5mm socket and pass it to your computer via the USB connection. In other words, the Burson Playmate 3 can be a great listening station, but can also take care of voice communications during gaming or for just video calls. As for how it sounds, as in the audio music-based output, it sounds like a Burson Audio product. If you haven't tried a Burson Audio product before, what that means is it sounds detailed, clean, and refined. Smooth and rich in just the right amounts without going too far into crispiness at one end or thickness at the other end. The maximum sense of space in its soundstage is a little bit limited by the use of a regular Delta Sigma DAC chip, but I mean that relative to some of the R2R DACs on the market, the DACs using the AKM AK4191 and AK4499 DAC chip combo, and even some of the 8-chip Cirrus Logic designs like the D70 Pro Octo. Before you think that that means you shouldn't go for the Playmate 3 though, it's worth noting that some of those issues with the DAC chip and its limited sense of soundstage depth can be combated in other ways. Firstly, the amp stage in the Playmate 3 is wonderful, and it helps to bring a sense of naturalness and ease back to the sound of the ES9039 DAC chip, so it doesn't come across as a wall of sound presentation, as they sometimes can. On top of that, you do get controls over some of the internal compensation and filtering options of the ES9039 DAC chip, including things like THD compensation. THD is total harmonic distortion, and switching off the compensation for that will make the Playmate 3 sound just a little bit more natural and easygoing. It's quite a subtle shift that makes, and the only way you'll really notice it is just by finding that it's easier to listen to and enjoy the Playmate 3 with the THD compensation switched off. I suspect that's because it's using feedback loops to squash any total harmonic distortion coming through the DAC circuit, because those sorts of feedback loops can also introduce timing issues. As it happens, our ears and our brains prefer to have a little bit of distortion rather than even a tiny amount of timing smear. I'll come back shortly and talk about the fact that you can also bypass the internal filters of the ES9039 DAC chip, but first I just want to get us a bit more context about how the Playmate 3 performs. Another single box DAC and headphone amp solution that you can buy for about $1,000 is the new xDuoo TA32. That offers some cool opportunities that I'm yet to explore, like swapping out the DAC cards and of course rolling the tubes. For now though, all of my testing has been done with the stock tubes and with the stock Roam DAC card. Comparing these two products with the Sony MDR Z1R headphones, the TA32 is just a little tiny bit softer on the edges of notes or the transients. That means that each sound is just a little tiny bit less articulated, a little bit less crisp. What that leads to is a very slightly reduced sense of energy in the sound, and that could be good or bad depending on your tastes and your headphones. The Playmate 3 offers a bit more energy and a bit more feel to the sound, a bit more impact in the bass compared to the TA32. On the other hand, the TA32 has a slightly softer, fuller and weightier sound. Not that it's thick or rich or warm, it's just a little bit weightier and fuller sounding than the Playmate 3. Both are actually excellent, so it's more a case of which you prefer rather than which one's better or worse. Curiously, in the stock setups as I've got them here, the Playmate 3 is actually the DAC and the headphone amp combo that provides a better sense of depth in the soundstage. That's something I tend to prefer, and that's one area that I would give a clear edge to the Playmate 3. Relatively speaking, the TA32 is a little bit more in your face and a bit more intimate and closed in. Not congested, just not as spacious as the Playmate 3. Again, neither is bad. The Burson is just surprisingly good. And after a lot of testing, I feel like both of these are excellent products with diverging audiences. Of course, I'll discuss the TA32 much more in its full review, including swapping the DAC cards and some tube rolling for good measure. So subscribe if you want more info about the TA32, but for now I think both of these are excellent devices, and it's proved to me that the Playmate 3 is performing at the sort of level that it should. And that allowed me to start playing with some other questions like, how does it perform, the Playmate 3, as a DAC? And let's just say that the strength of the Playmate 3 is its amp stage. It's definitely not bad as a DAC by any stretch, but I found that the TA32 running as an all-in-one, in other words using its DAC and its amp stage, was still better than feeding the Burson Playmate 3 using it as a DAC only out to a much higher end headphone amp. And what that says is that there's some magic or some synergy that Burson have crafted into the pairing of the DAC and the headphone amp within the Playmate 3. I don't really see there being a big benefit in buying the Playmate 3 if you're not going to make the most of its preamp / headphone amp stage. Again, it's not bad. The DAC on its own though is just not a strength in the Playmate 3. Stick to using it with headphones or active speakers and you're in for a treat. And so the Playmate 3 is shaping up as a mostly excellent computer-based audio companion. Let's talk about why I just said mostly though, and talk about the extra trick that the Playmate 3 has up its sleeve. The one issue I found with the Playmate 3 in my setup was when I wanted to switch between listening to headphones and then feeding out the output via the preamp to a set of active speakers. The problem only arises with dedicated audio apps, and so what I mean here is that if you're running the Playmate 3 with regular computer-based audio, so if you're playing games, you're doing video calls, whatever it might be, you're going to have none of the issues I'm about to talk about. But if you're on Windows and you're running applications like Roon or JRiver that take exclusive control of the audio device, in this case the Playmate 3, then you might have a couple of small, slightly annoying problems. Or really just one. In my experience running with Roon or JRiver with the exclusive output mode to the Playmate 3 for maximum possible sound quality, anytime I wanted to switch between headphone mode, DAC mode, and preamp mode, it was very briefly disconnecting the DAC from the computer for a fraction of a second, but it was enough that it broke the playback from Roon and JRiver. It just meant it stopped playback and all I had to do was go in and manually press play again, but it was a bit of an annoyance. Thankfully, that is the only issue, and it's only an issue if you're regularly switching between headphone mode and preamp mode, or DAC mode. If you're going to leave it almost predominantly in one of those modes, you're never going to have a problem. And as I said before, if you're using it for regular PC audio like gaming, you also won't have an issue. It's only with those dedicated music listening apps that take exclusive control. And if you're a Mac user, ignore everything I just said. It'll work perfectly. And so knowing that that is the only issue I've had with the Playmate 3 and that everything else has just been about musical enjoyment, let's now jump to the bonus feature that the Playmate 3's got under its hood. When I first received the Playmate 3 and was playing around with it, the menu options were quite complicated and a little bit confusing if I'm being honest. Thankfully, the team over at Burson are already making some changes both to the manual and to the menu system based on some of the feedback I gave them, or the questions I asked because I couldn't work it out for myself. And that's fantastic news because you'll maybe want to play with some of these features, specifically the ability to change how the filters are working inside the DAC chip. Essentially, what you're able to do with the ES903 DAC chip in the Playmate 3 is choose how much oversampling it's applying, or more importantly, switch it off altogether. And that's going to turn it into something resembling a non-oversampling DAC. That means that you could feed the Playmate 3 with externally upsampled music from a software like HQ Player. I'm not going to go into detail here about what HQ Player is, what it does and how it works, but if you just search HQ Player and Passion for Sound here on YouTube, you'll find a video where I talked all about it and explained how to set it up. What I will say here though, is that using high quality external upsampling before the music goes into the Playmate 3 can improve its sense of soundstage size, improve the sense of refinement, detail retrieval, the sense of separation of sounds. It can just generally make it all sound better. With its DSD-512 and 768 kHz PCM capabilities, the Burson Playmate 3 can take whatever you want to do in something like HQ Player and receive that through the USB socket. Now, for what it's worth, if you just got overwhelmed with all this talk of DSD-512 and 768 kHz and HQ Player and upsampling, don't stress, you can enjoy the Playmate 3 just as it is, straight out of the box. And in my opinion, it does sound best leaving the default settings switched on, but maybe going in and switching off the THD compensation. As I said earlier, it's not a big difference, but I think it just makes the sound easier and a bit more natural. And of course, you can always play with it for yourself and see what you like most. For now though, my time with the Playmate 3 has me very comfortable recommending it as a simple, single, and sleek one-box audio solution that's probably best for audio coming from your computer, but not limited to that at all. As I said earlier, you can start at just $599 and upgrade it piece by piece later if you want to, or you can just jump straight to the level of the deluxe, which is what I've described here, and enjoy maximum sound quality without ever undoing a screw. And so, as always, I'll put links in the description if that sounds good to you. And if you want to understand those upgrades I just mentioned, I'd recommend starting here with my explanation of how the Burson Audio V7 Vivids can completely transform the performance of an amp or a DAC that you put them into. For now, a huge thanks to YouTube channel members, also to channel Patreon members, and to those of you who leave super thanks on videos like this one. And until next time, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here again soon on Passion for Sound.